Life moves so fast that most of us spend our days feeling buried under the weight of pressure, anxiety, and constant uncertainty. Yet somewhere within all of that noise, there exists a quiet road that leads to genuine peace, a road that human beings have walked for thousands of years. No matter what comes at you, whether it is the crushing demands of your work, the tension in your closest relationships, or the sudden blows that nobody sees coming, you have the ability to remain steady, clear, and composed. That is not wishful thinking. That is the promise at the heart of Stoicism, a way of living that shows us how to take command of our inner world so that the outer world loses its power to break us. Right now, we are going to explore 10 of the most enduring lessons this ancient philosophy has to offer, lessons that can genuinely reshape how you move through the difficulties that life will never stop sending your way. These are not ideas that belong only in lecture halls or dusty books. They are living tools you can pick up and use starting today to build the kind of mental strength and emotional steadiness that most people spend their whole lives searching for. Whether you are dealing with a relationship that drains you, a workload that seems impossible, or a longing for something more meaningful, Stoic wisdom has something real to offer you. Walk with me through each of these teachings, from the art of living with clear intention to the discipline of keeping your emotions in check, and you will see how every single lesson builds on the last, creating a foundation where outside circumstances simply cannot reach your inner stillness. Before this is over, you will carry something useful away with you, a set of perspectives and habits that will allow you to face whatever comes with steadiness rather than panic. This is an invitation to begin something genuinely transformative, so let us move into it together and discover how a philosophy born in ancient times can give us exactly what modern life so desperately needs. If this kind of content matters to you, please subscribe and stay with the video from beginning to end, because every section builds on what came before. Think for a moment about a ship that leaves the harbor without any idea where it is headed. It bobs around at the mercy of whichever wind happens to blow, pushed in one direction and then another, with no ability to resist because it has no destination to steer toward. That is precisely what a human life looks like when it lacks a clearly defined purpose. Epictetus, one of the greatest Stoic teachers who ever lived, stressed again and again how essential it is to know what you are actually living for. He made it plain that the depth of a person's character reveals itself through difficulty, and that the harder the challenge, the more it honors the person who rises to meet it. When that statement is taken seriously, it stops being a nice quote and becomes a genuine instruction. Having a firm sense of purpose is not a luxury reserved for philosophers or spiritual figures. It is a practical necessity for anyone who wants to live with any degree of inner stability. Your purpose is not simply a career ambition or a list of things you would like to accomplish before you die. It goes much deeper than that. It is built from the values that feel most real to you, the kind of person you genuinely want to become, and the principles you are willing to stand behind, even when doing so is uncomfortable. To find that purpose, you have to be willing to sit with yourself honestly, to ask the hard questions, and resist the temptation to answer them with whatever sounds impressive. Once you have found it and made it your own, that purpose becomes something like a steady hand on your shoulder in moments of confusion. Life will absolutely bring challenges because it always does, but a person with a settled sense of direction experiences those challenges differently. They do not feel like walls, they feel like tests you have already agreed to take. The obstacles begin to look like necessary parts of the path, rather than evidence that something has gone terribly wrong. When your direction is clear and your values are solid, even very large problems begin to feel more workable. That is not magical thinking. That is what happens when the mind has something real to hold on to. Discovering this kind of purpose is not a single event that happens once. It is an ongoing conversation with yourself, a process that requires honest reflection spread over time. You have to be willing to look past the surface wants, the quick pleasures, and the shallow goals, and keep going until you reach something that actually feels like yours. That might mean setting aside habits that no longer serve you, or taking seriously ideas that challenge your current way of seeing things. None of that is comfortable, but it is exactly how genuine self-knowledge develops. Once that purpose is alive in you, your job is to protect and tend it with real effort. That means continuing to show up even when everything in you wants to stop. It means not using failure as a reason to abandon what you have committed to, because failure is not the opposite of progress, but a normal part of it. Your purpose is not simply the finish line you are running toward. It is the light that makes the entire run possible, the thing that keeps your feet moving even on the days when the road feels endless. Picture it as a lighthouse standing on a rocky coast. It does not protect the ship from every wave, but it makes sure the captain always knows where the shore is. Your purpose works the same way. When the storms of life do their worst, that inner clarity keeps you from losing yourself entirely. That is what Stoicism means when it speaks of will and determination. It is not about forcing the world to go your way. It is about being so rooted in who you are and what you stand for that the world's chaos cannot pull you under. Epictetus was clear that the most genuine source of power any person has is the commitment to their own purpose that no outside force can touch. With that understanding, nothing truly becomes impossible, and nothing can hollow out your spirit. So set aside some real time for this. Write down what you are actually living for. Let it settle into your bones and let it steer you. That clarity will hold you through everything. When someone does something that feels like an attack, the body and mind respond almost instantly. There is a surge of hurt, a pull toward defending yourself or striking back, and it can feel completely automatic. Stoicism does not ask you to pretend that feeling away. What it does offer, though, is a far more empowering idea, which is that your emotions do not arise from events themselves, but from the meaning your thinking assigns to those events. That means the offense does not actually control you, your interpretation of it does, and interpretation is something you can learn to influence. Every single time you feel that pull toward an immediate reaction, and you choose instead to pause, you are doing something genuinely significant. You are training the part of your mind that decides how you show up in the world. That is not a small thing. The mind is remarkably teachable, but it needs consistent practice, not just good intentions. Begin by giving yourself small daily exercises in self-direction. Set modest targets for yourself and meet them reliably. Something as simple as following through on a commitment you made to yourself builds the internal evidence that you can be trusted by your own mind, and that trust becomes the foundation of real, emotional control. Make a habit of staying rooted in whatever is actually happening right now, rather than in what happened before or might happen later, and take time to genuinely study your emotional patterns so you begin to understand why certain things set you off the way they do. The moment you truly accept that your reactions belong to you and not to the people or events that seem to cause them, you will notice something shift. You will feel less fragile and more grounded. There is a story worth considering here about a craftsperson who spends every single day doing the same work, refining the same skills, and getting quietly better at the same thing. This person does not get swept away by enthusiastic praise or crumble under sharp criticism. They keep their eyes on the craft itself, untouched by the noise around it. That kind of focused dedication creates a deep and genuine freedom because nothing outside can disturb what lives inside. You can develop that same quality of mind by being intentional about what you allow to live in your mental space. Think about it this way. You would not invite someone into your home who intended to make a mess and leave without cleaning it up. Apply the same logic to your inner world. Protect it from the thoughts that tear things down, from the company that diminishes you, and from the content that leaves you feeling worse than before. Fill that space instead with things that genuinely build you up. Read things that expand how you see the world. Have conversations that stretch your thinking. Spend your time with people who actually want to see you grow. Stoicism has never been only for philosophers living in another century. It is completely at home in the pressures of today, because what it addresses is not a particular era's problems, but the permanent human struggle to remain clear and intentional under pressure. Growing in your emotional understanding does not mean shutting your feelings away somewhere you cannot reach them. It means getting to know them so well that they stop running the show. One of the most practical things you can do is build a regular mindfulness or meditation practice. What these things do is create a small but crucial gap between the moment something happens and the moment you respond to it. In that gap, you get to choose. Over time, as that gap becomes more familiar, your choices become less reactive and more genuinely yours. The other thing worth cultivating is a mindset that sees difficulty as something to grow through, rather than something to run from. When something hard appears in your path, the Stoic instinct is not to ask why this is happening to you, but to recognize it as another opportunity to become more capable than you were before. That single reframe can change everything about how adversity feels. The commitment to guarding your mind is not something you finish. It is something you keep doing. It is a continuous choice to pay attention to your thoughts, take responsibility for your responses, and refuse to hand your peace over to whatever is happening around you. The longer you practice it, the more naturally it comes, and before long, you will realize that the external world has far less grip on your inner life than it once did. There is something freeing in the recognition that you will never be able to make everyone see things the way you do. Epictetus understood this completely. He pointed out that other people's judgments and behaviors are entirely outside the territory we can govern, but our responses to those judgments sit squarely within it. Even when the criticism directed at you is delivered harshly or unfairly, you are the one who decides how deeply it is allowed to reach. In a world where opinions are everywhere, and not all of them are kind, this principle is enormously practical. People come to their views through their own histories, their own wounds, and their own ways of making sense of things. Those views will not always line up with yours, and that is not a problem to be solved. It is simply the reality of living among other human beings. When criticism does arrive, the most useful first move is to look honestly at yourself. When you genuinely understand why you make the choices you make and what values are driving your behavior, the critical words of someone else carry far less force. If you know you are living according to what you believe in, a harsh judgment from outside becomes much easier to receive without being destabilized by it. Your own clear self-knowledge acts as a buffer. When you feel the sting of criticism, the Stoic response is not to throw up your defenses immediately. It is to slow down. Give yourself a breath. Then ask honestly whether there is anything worth considering in what was said. Strong feedback, even when it is delivered without care, sometimes contains something genuinely useful. The willingness to examine it rather than dismiss it is a mark of real emotional maturity. This does not mean accepting every criticism as accurate. It means being open enough to look before deciding. Alongside that, Stoicism offers a reminder about the value of patience and genuine kindness. Being patient does not mean going passive. It means staying composed, rather than letting a sharp moment push you into a reaction you will have to walk back later. Being gentle in your dealings with others, even those who have criticized you, protects the relationships that matter and keeps your own interior life cleaner. History gives us figures who lived through the harshest kinds of judgment and treatment without losing their sense of who they were. They stayed on their chosen road, regardless of what others threw at them. That kind of constancy is available to all of us, not as a rare gift, but as something that grows through practice. Handling criticism also asks something of your sense of identity. A thick skin is not about caring nothing for what others think. It is about knowing yourself deeply enough that another person's negative assessment does not become your self-definition. People sometimes criticize from places of pain or frustration that have nothing to do with you. Being able to see that clearly lets you respond to the behavior without absorbing the message as a verdict on your worth. You always have the freedom to pick out whatever is genuinely helpful and set the rest aside. That selective approach means you keep growing without carrying a weight that was never yours to carry. When criticism comes from someone genuinely close to you, the wisest response is often direct conversation. Ask them to say more. Share your own perspective calmly and without defensiveness. Real dialogue like this resolves misunderstandings and actually deepens the relationship rather than creating distance. Something else worth noting is the effect that a composed response to criticism has on the people around you. When others watch you receive difficult feedback with steadiness and a genuine willingness to reflect, it leaves an impression. You become an example of what emotional strength looks like in practice, and that matters beyond just your own life. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology has since confirmed, which is that our distress is not usually produced by events themselves, but by the stories we tell ourselves about those events. When you feel wounded by something someone has done, it is not the action itself that hurts you at the deepest level. It is the meaning your mind has constructed around it. That recognition is not a small thing, because it returns the power to you. You are the one who decides what something means, and that means you are the one who determines how much it actually touches you. Learning to work with offense in this way is not a matter of suppressing what you feel. When you are hurt, and pushing that away does not make it go away. Stoicism asks you to acknowledge what you are experiencing without letting it grab the steering wheel. Between the moment something offensive happens and the moment you respond, there is a space, and it is in that space that your real freedom lives. One of the most useful things you can do in that space is to deliberately shift how you are framing the situation. Instead of asking what was done to you, ask what you might be able to take from this. That is not the same thing as agreeing with whoever offended you. It is simply a way of extracting whatever value the experience might contain, so that it works for your growth rather than against your peace. If a friend says something cutting about how you are living your life, rather than feeling attacked, you might ask whether their words reflect any truth you have been avoiding, or whether they represent an opportunity to feel more certain about the choices you have already made. Either way, something useful can come out of it. Stoicism also keeps bringing us back to the importance of genuine empathy. When someone behaves in a way that feels offensive, pausing to ask what might be driving that behavior in them is not weakness, it is wisdom. Everyone is carrying something, and sometimes the way people act toward others is a reflection of what they are going through inside, rather than a true assessment of the person they are directing it at. That does not make the behavior acceptable, but it makes it more understandable, and understanding tends to dissolve anger more effectively than righteous indignation does. Forgiveness belongs in this conversation too, not as something you offer for the other person's benefit, but as something you practice for your own. Holding tightly to resentment is genuinely costly. It takes up mental and emotional space that could be used for something far better. Choosing to release that hold is not the same as saying what happened was fine. It is simply recognizing that the ongoing grip of bitterness harms you more than it does anyone else. Every time you work through an offense, rather than being consumed by it, you are building something real. Your resilience grows exactly the way physical strength grows, through repeated effort against resistance. The more you practice this, the more it becomes your natural way of responding, until the things that used to knock you down simply do not land with the same force. This is not overnight work. It takes patience, continued self-awareness, and a genuine dedication to your own development. But every single instance where you choose a thoughtful response over a reactive one is a deposit into an account that keeps paying you back. Epictetus offered an observation that cuts right to the heart of how human suffering actually works. He said that the things that frighten us and fill us with shame are not the events that occur, but the meaning our minds give to those events. That insight matters enormously because it locates both the problem and the solution in the same place, which is inside us. Neither fear nor shame is woven into the fabric of any situation. They are the product of how we interpret what is happening, and interpretation is something we can work with. Fear in its healthy form is a signal, a built-in alarm system that tries to protect you from genuine danger. But when it overgrows its function, it stops serving you and starts limiting you. The Stoic approach to fear is not avoidance. It is honest examination. When you feel afraid, name exactly what it is you are afraid of. Break it down as specifically as you can. More often than not, you will find that the fear has far more power in the vague form than it does when it is looked at directly. Take the very common fear of speaking in front of an audience. For many people, that fear feels enormous. But when you break it down, what exactly is the threat? That people might disagree with you, that you might stumble over a word, that you will not be perfect. When these specific fears are examined honestly, they usually shrink. The audience is not gathering in the hope that you will fail. They are there to receive something. And if you do stumble, as every person who has ever spoken publicly has done, the world continues. By moving toward the thing that scares you rather than away from it, and by preparing as thoroughly as you can, you gradually take the power back. Each time you do it, the fear has a little less grip. Shame is a different but related experience. It tends to come with a sense of deep unworthiness, a feeling that some past mistake or flaw defines you in a way that cannot be undone. Stoicism does not ask you to pretend your mistakes did not happen. It asks you to look at them honestly, understand what produced them, extract whatever can be learned, and then release them rather than carrying them forward as a permanent judgment against yourself. The process of honest reflection, followed by deliberate self-forgiveness, is how a mistake gets transformed from a source of ongoing pain into a building block for genuine growth. Forgiving yourself is not a way of excusing what happened. It is a way of breaking the cycle of self-punishment so you can actually move forward rather than circling the same painful memory indefinitely. Working with both fear and shame is something you do incrementally. You do not dismantle either of them in one bold confrontation. You take small, deliberate steps toward the things that trigger those feelings, and you use each step as information about how to take the next one. Over time, the emotional charge weakens, and what once felt paralyzing starts to feel manageable. One more thing worth mentioning here is the role of honest connection with other people. Sharing your fears and your feelings of shame with someone you genuinely trust can be remarkably liberating. The act of speaking something aloud to another person often strips it of much of its power, and the discovery that others have faced similar things and survived them can provide the kind of perspective that is hard to find entirely on your own. Among the most practical gifts that Stoic philosophy offers is this idea of thinking ahead, not in the sense of catastrophizing or feeding anxiety, but in the sense of mentally preparing yourself for what might realistically go wrong, so that nothing catches you completely off guard. Epictetus taught that by looking clearly at the potential difficulties lying ahead on any given path, we arm ourselves to face them with composure rather than surprise. This is completely different from pessimism. Pessimism expects things to go wrong and then stops there. What Stoicism proposes is that you think through the challenges that might arise and then deliberately consider how you would respond to them. There is actually a name for a version of this practice in the Stoic tradition. It is sometimes called the premeditation of adversity, and it involves imagining in advance the difficulties that a situation might produce. Before an important meeting, for example, you might spend a few minutes thinking through what could make it difficult. Technical problems, challenging questions, your own nerves, the possibility of conflict. By running through those scenarios ahead of time, you give yourself the chance to think about your responses before you are in the middle of the pressure. This is not about manufacturing stress in advance. It is about ensuring that when real stress arrives, you are already familiar with the territory. People who have mentally rehearsed handling difficulties tend to recover their balance faster when things go sideways. They have practiced the cognitive moves required, and so those moves come more naturally under pressure. This preparation also requires a genuine willingness to remain flexible. Life has a remarkable talent for not going the way you planned, and when you have locked yourself into a rigid expectation of how things should unfold, every deviation from that expectation becomes a source of frustration. By accepting ahead of time that things may well develop differently than you intended, you hold your plans loosely enough to adjust them when reality requires it. That flexibility is not weakness, it is intelligence. Another part of this preparation involves taking honest stock of what you actually have available to you. It is easy to focus so much on what might go wrong that you forget to account for your own capabilities, your accumulated knowledge, and the people around you who can help. A balanced view of what you are facing includes both the challenges and the resources. That balance keeps you ready without tipping you into unnecessary dread. The capacity to anticipate difficulty also builds something essential in you over time, which is a long-game mentality. When you expect that challenges are going to come, you stop treating them as evidence that something has broken down and start treating them as normal parts of any worthwhile path. That shift produces patience, and patience in turn produces the kind of endurance that carries people through things that defeat those who expected an easier road. Looking back at your own history can also sharpen your ability to prepare. What kinds of obstacles have come up repeatedly for you? What worked when you faced them, and what did not? The patterns in your past experiences are genuinely instructive if you take the time to study them. And a regular mindfulness practice can make all of this more effective by keeping you alert to what is actually happening in the present moment rather than sleepwalking through it. The sentence that Epictetus is probably most famous for captures something so essential that it is worth sitting with for a long moment. He said that what matters is not what happens to us, but how we choose to respond. There is an entire philosophy contained in that single idea, and it applies to every single domain of human experience. Our genuine power does not lie in arranging circumstances to suit us. It lies in the quality and intentionality of our inner responses to whatever circumstances appear. That kind of strength is built, not given. It develops through self-awareness and through the repeated practice of choosing your response rather than simply reacting. It begins with learning to notice what you feel without immediately being carried away by it. Not pushing the feeling away, but not being ruled by it either. You observe it, you locate where it is coming from, and in doing so, you reclaim a degree of choice over what happens next. A huge part of this inner work involves being clear about what actually belongs to you and what does not. You cannot control whether someone likes you, whether circumstances cooperate, or whether other people behave well. You can control how you interpret things, how you respond to them, and how consistently you live according to what you value. Focusing your energy on that territory, the territory that genuinely belongs to you, is not giving up. It is operating intelligently. It preserves your resources for the things that can actually be influenced and frees you from burning energy on the things that cannot. Forgiveness also belongs under this heading of inner strength. When you carry old grudges, they do not harm the person you hold them against nearly as much as they harm you. They occupy mental and emotional space, color your perceptions, and wear you down over time. Choosing to let go of that weight is one of the most self-serving things you can do, and Stoicism is honest enough to frame it that way. Releasing resentment is not about being noble, it is about being free. Resilience is built incrementally, through the accumulation of smaller decisions to stay with difficulty rather than abandoning it. Every setback you face and move through adds something to your inner reserves. Over time, those reserves grow large enough that what used to knock you over simply bends you a little. The people and communities around you matter here too. Seeking out relationships with people who challenge and support you, engaging with ideas that stretch your thinking, and drawing on whatever spiritual or philosophical practice gives you grounding are all legitimate parts of building inner strength. So is gratitude, which may sound simple but is actually a powerful redirector of attention. When you train yourself to notice what is working and what you value, rather than fixating only on what is missing or threatening, your emotional baseline rises. Vulnerability also belongs here, which is perhaps the most counterintuitive piece. Acknowledging fear and uncertainty honestly, without being destroyed by it, is not weakness. It is the foundation of genuine courage. The strength you build on that kind of honest self-knowledge is far more durable than any strength built on pretense. Between any stimulus and your response, there is a space, and learning to use that space deliberately is one of the most transformative skills a human being can develop. Consider something as ordinary as getting cut off in traffic. The immediate impulse might be irritation, or worse, and acting on that impulse accomplishes nothing except making the situation feel worse. Choosing instead to take a breath and let it pass does not mean the other driver was not inconsiderate. It means your peace is worth more than your outrage. Delayed gratification belongs in this conversation too, because a great deal of self-restraint involves the willingness to resist what feels good right now in service of something more important later. The capacity to hold off, to work toward longer-term rewards, even when shorter ones are available, is a form of discipline that strengthens everything else. In conversation and conflict, restraint in speech matters just as much. Words spoken in heat often damage things that take a long time to repair. The Stoic habit of asking whether what you are about to say is actually constructive and actually reflects your values is a simple filter that prevents enormous amounts of unnecessary damage. All of this requires ongoing self-review, and the Stoics practiced that daily. Taking time at the end of each day to look honestly at where you were restrained and where you were not, and asking what you would do differently, builds exactly the kind of self-awareness that makes better responses possible. A consistent mindfulness practice supports all of it by training your mind to notice what is arising before it has already taken over. There is something deeply freeing about the moment you stop fighting what is actually real. The energy we pour into resisting facts that cannot be changed is genuinely wasted, and Stoicism has always been clear about that. Acceptance is not the same as defeat. It is the honest recognition of what is so that your energy can go toward what is actually possible. If something difficult has happened, whether it is losing a job, ending a relationship, or facing a health challenge, the resistance stage is natural, but it is not productive. The moment you stop arguing with what is real and start asking what your options are, you move from being stuck to being in motion. Mindfulness supports this in a very practical way because it trains you to stay with what is actually happening rather than being trapped in what you wish were happening or what you fear might happen. By developing the ability to observe your experience without immediately labeling it as good or bad, or trying to push it away, you build a kind of foundational steadiness that makes acceptance far easier. Stoicism is clear that acceptance is not passivity. It is the ground from which real action grows. The same difficulty that paralyzes someone who is busy resisting it becomes a teacher for someone who has accepted it and is asking what it has to offer. That question, "What can I learn from this?" is one of the most useful you can carry with you. Letting go of the demand for perfection is part of this too. The pursuit of something flawless in yourself or your circumstances is a guaranteed source of chronic dissatisfaction because perfection is not a destination that exists. What does exist is progress, effort, and the authentic beauty of a life lived fully, with all of its inevitable roughness included. By releasing the demand for things to be otherwise than they are and developing genuine appreciation for what you already have, you move from scarcity to abundance in your inner experience. That shift is not dependent on external conditions. It happens in how you relate to what is in front of you. Gratitude is one of the most reliable tools for making that shift. When your attention goes toward what you have and value rather than what is missing, your relationship to your own life changes in ways that are both real and sustaining. Acceptance extends naturally to relationships as well. We all carry expectations about how others should behave, and those expectations are a reliable source of frustration and disappointment. When you begin to accept people as they actually are, rather than as you would like them to be, something shifts in the quality of those connections. This does not mean accepting harm or tolerating mistreatment. It means releasing the fantasy version of who someone should be and engaging with who they actually are. Real compassion and genuine empathy are built on exactly that kind of honest seeing. The Stoics, Epictetus among them, spoke often of living in alignment with nature, and what they meant by this is worth understanding clearly. They were not talking primarily about the natural world, though that is part of it. They were talking about the deeper nature of human beings, which includes our capacity for reason, our social bonds, and our inherent connection to something larger than ourselves. To live according to nature in this sense is to live authentically, to act in ways that are genuinely consistent with who and what we are, rather than performing a version of ourselves shaped entirely by external expectations. This begins with genuine self-knowledge. You have to understand your own values, your real strengths, and the purpose that feels most true to you before you can make choices that actually align with your nature, rather than simply conforming to whatever happens to be expected of you. Part of this alignment involves accepting that human life moves in cycles. Things grow and then decline. Relationships change. Circumstances shift. Seasons pass. Fighting those cycles, rather than moving with them, is exhausting and ultimately futile. The wisdom is in learning to navigate the transitions with a kind of graceful acceptance that loses nothing of your integrity. The virtues that Stoic philosophy has always centered, wisdom, courage, justice, and self-restraint, are understood as the qualities most essential to living well. Wisdom lets you perceive clearly and decide well. Courage gives you the capacity to act despite fear and difficulty. Justice keeps your dealings with others grounded in honesty and fairness. Restraint ensures that your short-term impulses do not consistently override your long-term well-being. Together, these qualities point the way toward a life that is genuinely in harmony with human nature at its best. Living according to nature also means taking seriously our fundamental need for connection. Stoicism never proposed a kind of isolated self-sufficiency. It consistently acknowledged that human beings are social creatures who need each other, and that contributing to the communities we belong to is part of living well. When you extend genuine care, cooperation, and compassion toward those around you, you are not just being a good neighbor, you are fulfilling something essential in your own nature. Another dimension of this is simplicity, not poverty or deprivation, but a deliberate releasing of what is unnecessary, so that what genuinely matters has room to breathe. When you strip away the noise and the clutter and the endless acquiring of things that do not actually satisfy, what remains is often far richer. Meaningful relationships, honest work, growth, and genuine rest are among the things that tend to emerge when the excess is cleared. Stoicism connects this to gratitude and to trusting the process rather than insisting on controlling every outcome. There is a kind of faith involved, a willingness to stay present and appreciative with what you have, rather than perpetually anxious about what you might lose. And there is the question of the world itself. Living according to nature includes recognizing that we are part of an ecosystem that sustains us and that we have genuine responsibilities toward it. The choices we make about consumption and waste and how we treat the living world around us are expressions of how seriously we take that connection. Mindfulness, in the broadest sense, supports all of this by helping us stay present and aware, making choices with genuine intention rather than simply reacting to whatever pulls at us most forcefully in any given moment. As this journey through Stoic wisdom draws to a close, what remains is something simple and essential. The power you are looking for is not somewhere out there in better circumstances or other people's approval, or a world arranged to suit you. It is in the quality of your own mind and the intentionality of your own choices. The 10 principles we have walked through are not a system to be memorized and recited. They are ways of being that grow through practice and that reward you more richly the more consistently you apply them. Carry them with you. Thank you for joining us here at Stoic Journal. If this spoke to something in you, please take a look at the other videos available and keep moving forward on this path. Stay grounded, stay strong, and keep choosing wisdom.